It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
Here with Barnet Bain on this extremely warm.
It's been hot.
It is really hot, isn't it?
Here in Southern California. Because our listeners, of course, are around the world.
They are, but it's a little toasty even in this studio, as a matter of fact.
That's true.
As a matter of fact. So maybe I need to take off this.
Get comfortable. Because we're going to be here for a little while.
This garment.
We've got a couple things to talk about today.
We do. We do.
I know that you've been thinking about this because you told me that. You said, this has been on my mind this week. And
well, what's been on my mind is, you know, we have a political leadership conference happening as we speak in Tampa, Florida, and another coming up. We're in the midst of this political season, and there is so much in the culture around the nature of leadership. What is leadership? Where is leadership going? Is there do we have a mature leadership? What are the stakes? What is the nature of the conversation around leadership? And so I wanted to share with you something that I came across from Lao Tzu, who knows a thing or two.
About a thing or two.
About a thing or two. A leader is best when people barely know that he exists. Not so good when people obey and acclaim him. Worst when they despise him. Fail to honor people, they fail to honor you. But of a good leader who talks little, when his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will all say, we did this ourselves. So
that's delicious.
That is delicious. And I want to just put a coda on that. Some time ago, I visited the Reagan Library. And what lingered with me to this day was a quote of Ronald Reagan's, who said that there is no I'm going to mangle this quote, but there is no telling the heights one can achieve if he or she does not care who gets the credit.
Well said, Mr. Reagan.
Well said, isn't it? Well
said.
So,
all the things that.
So there are wisdoms there, and something to consider, and maybe grist for the mill. For this day, for this program, with this very special guest that we have joining us today.
And you know, I want to lead into this, that, you know, the quality in leadership that gets expressed in those ways where it's not about me as a leader, it's not about my accomplishments, it's a sense beyond me. The ability to look beyond, and we talk about this all the time, having a sense of vision, and a vision of possibilities, not crunched down to, you know, clearly identified goals and, you know, criteria for outcome, not that way, but it's just a sense of something that is like a trail that we're willing to follow. And
it's like a scent. Even more than a trail. It's so ephemeral that like a hound dog with his nose in the wind, or her nose in the wind, there is some sense, some being sense that leads us towards the discovery of something, and likewise towards being discovered by something.
Just writing that. Hey, you're good, man.
Well, you know, when you're psychic, you're psychic.
Yeah.
I want to invite our very, very dear friend. Did I say that she was our very dear friend?
You did.
I did, right? I love this
gal.
Meta-human.
The meta-human. Suprahuman.
This suprahuman. We have with us today our friend Barbara Marx Hubbard. She has been called the voice for conscious evolution of our time by Deepak Chopra. And the greatest visionary, the greatest perceiver of futures by no less than Buckminster Fuller. She's the subject of Neil Donald Walsh's book, The Mother of Invention. She is a prolific author, a visionary, a social innovator, an extraordinary thinker and educator. She's co-founder and chairperson of the Foundation for Conscious Evolution, and a whole lot more. But rather than let's make it a little less brittle, and let's have Barbara join us right now because being is believing. So, and with that, Barbara, welcome again to Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Oh, thank you, Barnet. Did you say seeing is believing or being is believing?
Being is believing.
Being is believing.
Oh, very, very good.
Yeah, we'll
Being.
tuck that one in our back pocket for today.
I like that. You know, I have a comment on leadership.
Yeah,
Yes.
please. We brought you on for that very purpose. We knew you might have a thing or two to say.
Something tucked away.
I've just actually teaching about it on the Evolutionary Agents of Conscious Evolution, and here is just a thought about, now this is not leadership in general, but evolutionary leadership. Feels to me like you're led from within towards something emergent that you have not fully seen before, but that attracts you deeply, and that you share because you are going somewhere toward it.
Absolutely.
And it's an emergent property for an evolutionary leadership. Whereas you think of most of the leaders, like in the political arena now, not only is it oppositional and like gladiators forced to kill each other, but even more when you say, what are they leading us toward? It might be the best they could say is to solve a problem. Maybe.
Yes.
But you remember the old George Bush with the vision thing?
Yes.
Combination of that deep feeling of being led by an impulse greater than you are within you, attracting you so deeply that you share it, you lead people toward something that somehow activates that impulse within them, which is already perhaps stimulated by your attraction. And if it's really good, they're not so much attracted to you as they are to that inside themselves that gets turned on.
That's beautiful. And you might say there's a quality in that something, in what it is we're following. There's a quality that's generative.
Right.
Right.
There's a quality that is
and
causal.
Emergent. There's another nice word along with generative is emerging, that you haven't yet seen it before. You're not only just solving an existing problem, but you are attracted it toward something. If you're really leading, it doesn't mean you're just solving a problem. You're evolving.
So I want to add something to your point, Barbara, very much to your point. You are there is something additive that is being brought by one's very presence, and that implies that a certain ownership, a certain maturity that can happen on the in the realization of the reactions that we have, the strategies that we have to deal with the challenges of life that are almost entirely hand-me-down, that are the result of other people's thinking and other people's modeling and other people's solutions, for the most part less and less effective. But it requires a tremendous maturity and insight and courage to be able to own that, recognize it, and allow it to be in its place, and then begin to develop a relationship responsive to something that comes through you from deep inside that you refer to as this evolutionary flicker.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, Barnet. And when you say yes to it, it often starts with discontent or depression, or something isn't working here. There's more inside me. What is it? And it's interesting because that now happens at every age. It used to happen when you were young, but it happens now middle-aged, old age. And I think the impulse of evolution is turning on. It's turning up its intensity.
Well, because the modulators are not sufficient. There's not one of the things that comes to my mind is just this idea of capacity. So, Barnet, we were speaking about this. The space required to sort of receive the message. There has to be space. And I'll just say that, when I'm in a reactive place, I'm crunching everything down to a very narrow perspective. I'm fitting everything in a very small box.
Into what is already known, your experience.
That's exactly right. And so the idea of being able to have developed, as you're saying, to developmentally be prepared and have the capacity for and to handle uncertainty. We talked about this when Gene Houston was on the show, about how the relationship with uncertainty is changing and must change in order to bring on these new potentialities.
Well, one thing about uncertainty right now is that it's so certain to be uncertain.
That's true.
That we can be certain of that.
That's one thing we can be certain of.
I mean, if you really want to be certain about anything.
It used to just be death and taxes, but now...
Oh, boy.
But now we have a trifecta of uncertainty.
That's right.
But there's another thing about it, that the actual impulse within us, when you get the frequency of it to being something that impels you and attracts you personally, any actual certainty that anybody gets these days is when that impulse is strong enough within to feel that you're being guided by something.
Well, you are speaking to something, and I knew that you would get there, but every time we speak, you get there faster. So pretty soon, you have gotten there before we start we have the conversation. You're speaking to a very different relationship with life, with mystery, and it is you're talking about frequency now, and you're talking about states, heart-centered for the most part, not necessarily emotion-driven, but heart-centered, embodied feeling states. And I'm inviting you to say more. I know you have a lot to say around this subject.
Well, in the more traditional religious language, it's incarnational.
Interesting.
It incarnates the impulse when you say yes. And then there's another beautiful word in the Catholic tradition, transubstantiation. Mm-hmm. So we are a certain substance, a certain frequency, and that yes to the impulse within us, I find the yes has a frequency because it's really saying yes to a deeper impulse that has itself a frequency. And then the frequency of the impulse starts to animate and affect the denser frequency of your identity as a local self.
So it shifts. When you begin to shift the frequency, the resonance, the vibration of your local self, it shifts everything. It shifts the tone or the themes, the whole nature of, if this was a sleeping state or a dream state, let's just say it was, it shifts the whole nature of that experience, of that. It would shift the entire dream and everyone in it, as a rising tide lifts all boats.
It's true, and the word animate is a word I really like. Animus, anima. I personally feel animated by an impulse that is related to the impulse of creation in the larger story of evolution, that got us from no thing at all to everything that is. I mean, just think of the mystery of that.
Yes.
And that is what's in everybody, creative. And I asked Barnet if we could really be creative on this show, and he said he's nothing but creative. I just love Barnet. I want everybody to know that.
Oh, see, it's out. He's a lovable guy.
Co-creative partner, and he's just fantastic to be with. That's what I think. But now, Barnet, given the distance, that because we've had the conversations where at Louis' restaurant, where we actually get what happens? Animated by the impulse now being shared in a resonant field, and then you really get turned on.
Yes, there is something that happens that the best metaphor I can conjure for it right now is what happens when you begin to tune up a cello 20 feet away from a grand piano, and all the piano, the strings in the soundboard of the piano begin to vibrate, all magically, as if all by themselves, as if there was some unseen force, some unseen hand that is plucking him. And of course, there is this field vibration. When, as the mystics have said, when two or more are gathered, there is a harmonic, there is a juicy interaction that happens in the unseen. That's very, we can feel it. We have names for it. Love at first sight. We have all kinds of names for it. Lao Tzu, whose poetry is sitting open in front of me as we speak, says the way to use life is to do nothing through acting. The way to use life is to do everything through being.
Which is how we started the show.
Round and round and round we go.
Yeah.
Well, I have something to add to that, which is one of my favorite phrases, which is vocational arousal.
I like that.
Yes,
Vocational arousal.
Unpack that
Vocational
for our
arousal.
listeners. Unpack that for our listeners.
Well, see, the impulse that one is led by that makes you into a leader because you are attracted, that impulse has, it is a rather boring word, but life purpose, vocation, soul's code, what you feel that you were born to express.
Simple language is it's what stirs you from the inside.
What stirs your heart to
Yes.
passion.
Right.
Yeah, what stirs you to action, what stirs you to want to do something.
So let's say you're stirred from within to do something, and you start to actually express it. See, that's where your leadership begins, because you're saying yes, but then you don't just sit there. You might reach out. You might call a friend. You might go to an organization. You might read a book and call the author, whatever it is.
I usually call you.
You can just call Barbara.
I call Barnet.
There you go.
But I do something to go towards what attracts me. Yeah, and I used to know Abraham Maslow, the psychologist, and he said the way people get to be self-actualizing is they feel this internally, and that you almost have to be with others that you empathize with in order to self-actualize.
Oh, this is fantastic. All right, listen, we need to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk more about this idea of organizing around a felt connection, and I know that's a big part of the Birth 2012, which we'll talk about when we get back here on Cutting Edge Consciousness. Stay with us.
Okay.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Barnet Bain, and I'm here with my my cohort and partner, Freeman Michaels, and my dear friend, Barbara Marx Hubbard, is our guest today. So before the break, Freeman, you were itching with supersexual desire.
Supra, yeah. No, that's right. That's exactly what I was feeling. The felt sense of connection, which doesn't fall into a lot of our old orientation. It's an evolving sense of possibility that you and I, Barnet, both understand how to organize around, because I believe you and I wouldn't be doing what we're doing here today if it weren't for this kind of impulse that had us both saying yes to a path that was of its own making in some way. So, Barbara, I know for you that the offer of Birth 2012, this is December 22nd, 2012, when you are going to lead a whole bunch of amazing leaders and a whole bunch of people you've been training in a organized birth of evolutionary consciousness. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, yes, and it fits right into what we've been saying, having been led from within by an impulse that said our crisis is a birth. What all these problems are, including now global warming and climate change and all, are all evolutionary drivers towards something emergent. Or not, depending on our conscious attention to creating what what's coming out of these crises, because it's clear we can't go on in self-centered consciousness, overpopulating, polluting, using up resources, dominating and controlling each other and our environment. It's sort of like an end of a phase of human consciousness is closing while something new is being born in I don't know how many millions. So my impulse was to tell the story of the birth of a co-creative, co-evolving humanity. And for years I did that. Since 1966, I was very devoted storyteller. But finally teaching on the Shift Network with Stephen Dinan and teaching people about the idea that a birth would be a time of collective convergence of what's emerging, of what's loving, of what's good. It would be an experience of shared consciousness that could shift the consciousness of Earth. And so Stephen and I decided together to produce such an event. And we chose December 22nd, 2012, because it's the day after December 21st. And December 21st is often, in the media particularly, they think of it as doom and disaster. But, that there is something ending, but that's an exaggerated thing. So we would like to invite people to participate in what's good, what's creative, what's being born as the beginning of the emergence of a planetary culture. I mean, we're infantile in creating this new culture. Yeah. And so the planetary birth on December 22nd is a fulfillment of that impulse in me that led me and now so many others to join together for a collective planetary shift.
And synchronistically, and this is the part I love, the primary reason for the date is because of this sort of prognostication with the December 21st date. But it so happens that December 22nd is also going to be your 83rd birthday.
That's true. But
well, and I'm going to draw a conclusion here that may or may not be accurate, but it's kind of fun, is that you were chosen to do this.
I definitely was chosen in the sense that the impulse came to me, and then I chose to say yes. And in the deepest sense of the word choice, I don't think I ever had any choice.
Right.
Because if any one of us have a really strong creative impulse, this actually it's the one time when you don't have to choose, because if it's strong enough, you love it.
Well, this is really at the core of everything we're talking about, and everything that you have been speaking to and writing about and modeling in your life since the very early 60s. The evolution, the movement is from an unawareness to a kindling awareness of the glow of life within us, which leads. It is that glow which leads.
It leads, and it's really evolution by attraction.
Beautiful.
And that's why I call it vocational arousal. And here's a beautiful phrase: to have a baby, you join your genes. Nature does this miracle of a sperm and an egg creating a being. Totally miraculous, but at least the lovers are attracted to each other. So,
or they think they are.
They think they are. So in the next stage of suprasex or co-creativity, you join your genius with others.
And something I've heard you say is you co-ordinate. Okay. Now, I'm not sure how you said this, so forgive me, but I'm going to run with it a little bit. This idea of ordination, of really celebrating what's special, the essential quality, and I know you wrote a book about ego and this essential quality, but the celebrating of the essence of somebody else. And so to co-ordinate means each person is actually seeing the genius in the other person.
They're not only seeing it, they love it.
There you go. I'm glad I got that right. I was worried as I was saying.
We become ordained.
That's what I'm saying.
We become ordained as...
Well, Barbara said it. I just repeated it.
You become co-ordained, and you actually co-ordain each other.
That's it. That's beautiful.
Seeing the divine essence of one another and yearning to join with it. And it's I call it telerotic rather than erotic. Telos meaning higher purpose, and eros. So it's very passionate. It's as passionate as a deep sexual attraction. And I believe that nature is inventing an energy as great as sexual attraction. It's suprasexual attraction to join your genius with others. And I've had that in my life. From time to time, I've found a particular individual or group where the joining of my genius with that person or group's genius, like Stephen Dinan and I had this in order to create the planetary birth event, because he had the same deep impulse for a global shift and a love of the Christ and all of that, and we translated it together into this. And then other people are coming in because it attracts their impulse. And what we're all realizing is you can't do this alone. And there has to be ways of connecting without anybody trying to own or dominate anybody else.
You have been a spokesperson and a model of this this changing paradigm, from what has been to what might be, and you are comfortable in the energy that is not this and not yet that, this place of this beautiful uncertainty, this liminal place of being between. And that is one of the great gifts of being around you, is to have as a model a sense of ease in this unknown, a sense of being able to weather enormous forces out of confidence that is born from a deep sense of character and intimacy with values. And so it occurs to me that there are many, many people for whom these very challenging times are crazy making, and that the message of how to be in these extraordinary states that you bring is an important one.
You know, I've always thought of myself as a new norm, not extra norm. I mean, there are people that, like mystics and saints and gurus of various kinds. It always seemed to me that what's emerging in us as a whole human species is that creative union with the impulse, with the divine, as co-creators.
Yeah.
Now, I've never thought of that as extraordinary, but rather normal. And so now the difference in my life is when I got started with this impulse, I didn't know one single person like me. And now, everywhere I turn, there are people turning on.
Well, it's risen to meet you. And we're going back. It's so interesting, because we're going right back to the beginning of the show, where we're talking about the quality, this generous quality in a leader. And what you're saying, I love it, the new norm. It's like there was this sense that it wasn't about being special.
Right.
It was about a part in you that you offered in the most generous way, and subsequently people have rushed in to meet you. That's a piece, I think, that is really important, because a lot of people have this faint sense of their genius, and this is me as well. And the tyranny of our cultural agreements is that it is the crunching down to what it's going to look like and how we're going to make money on it, how we're going to express it for us. What you model and what your work expresses is this generous quality where it's really an offer. And it's not and it's the new norm. So there's an expectation. And if you've ever had a mentor that really rises you up, they expect you to be great. They hold the vision of your greatness, and it's very easy then to meet them, right?
It is. And, you know, as I'm teaching on Shift Network, this agent of conscious evolution, I'm attracting people exactly like me, mainly women over 50. They seem to be the most emerging of all. And of the postmenopausal Regenopause feminine. This is a very powerful type, and she is, instead of reproducing the species, or now feeling she's kind of aging and failing, she seems to be more vital, more creative, and if she says yes to that impulse within her, of course it can happen at any time, but 50, 60, 70, nature has given us a time frame in here for the women to become what I call the feminine co-creator. I believe it's a new archetype.
So you're speaking to, you've put a name to this, you've put a wonderful name to this, memorable name to this. You're now calling this Regenopods.
Yes.
And we've talked at length about this, and I submit that Regenopods is a neutral, is a gender neutral experience, and that men as well have not only the ability but have this opportunity, this growth opportunity to suspend in themselves an out of balance sense of will and action to create, and you're using it, of course, when you refer to women who are postmenopausal, to procreate. That those energies are suspended from that, the expression in that form, and there's an opportunity for them to be refocused into this whole new, this entirely new regenesis.
I think that's completely right, and I have had a lot of empathy with men who are going through their own regenopause, or somebody call it andropause, is that there's much more social structure around a man who feels he needs to succeed at doing certain things. Whereas women, after they're not having any babies, and they're living this more liberated life in our culture, there's no social pattern for us to really overcome. Whereas a man who has a lot of pressure of how to succeed at whatever level he may be, is harder to break it.
Right.
But when he feels that internal impulse, like I feel that with you, Barnet, the creative impulse is so driving that you're going to break all those patterns and be in that regenerative mode, because you've said yes.
And I mean, it's a great point. I mean, the thing that I would say is that when someone picks up the scent, again, I'm tracking back to again the beginning of the conversation. When the frequency, when it doesn't take much of tapping into the frequency to want more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while that may be the current status quo, my personal belief is that will change very quickly as people, again, if the offer is generous. I mean, this is where, personally, I think we have to be a little careful. When we make it gender specific, it gets less generous. But if we understand that the quality may be expressed more, perhaps, in women over 50, that's possible. I'm okay with that. But the quality in and of itself is what's of value.
It's ageless, and I didn't mean to limit it to that.
No, I don't think I didn't take it that way, but I do recognize there's a pattern here. But one of the distractions is to get hooked into the pattern, and then it becomes this whole way that everyone's crunching it down to how it looks versus what the essential quality is underneath.
Right. I mean, I was with a group of young folks in Boulder. There was a 12-year-old boy there who had been to Rio and was talking with Maurice Strong and articulated this, and I was just realizing that anything to do with age or gender no longer applies here.
Beautiful.
It no longer applies at all. And one thing that my deepest hope for Birth 2012 on December 22nd is that it will be a sense of empowerment for that impulse within millions of us simultaneously.
So let's talk about that. We need to talk about the event. Yeah.
Well, the event will be it's going to be a global event covered on internet, and then it will go into a live presentation based in Los Angeles is the current idea, and it will cover celebrations and various local hubs. Like if any of your listeners want to participate, the first thing they do is go to the website birth2012.com.
birth2012.com.
Right, and
Okay.
then it says, would you like to create an event or create a hub? So you click on create an event or create a hub. If you're creating a hub or an event, you just gather some friends together and put yourself on the map on Birth 2012. So this map just indicates that you would like to participate. And it can be at a small scale of just being together and probably tuning into the internet, or you can do a larger event like they're doing in Tucson, where she wants to get half of Tucson there, or it can be a big event like in Mexico that is being planned, or it can be really a deep interpersonal connection to the field of consciousness that's being lifted up together. And there is some indication from people who've studied this that 350,000 people being in heart resonance, that is to say, just in a state of love, will in and of itself be connected by the larger field and affect everybody simultaneously. So if you want to just say in the simplest terms, it's an expression of love.
So Birth 2012 also has a Facebook page. And for those of our audience who are Facebook, we won't say addicted as, but who have a predilection, shall we say, to have their Facebook page opened, as our producer and engineer does in this moment. You, Spence, you can go right to Birth 2012 right there.
We just signed our engineer up.
We sign you right up.
All right, and for all of you who want more information, we invite you to come to the website, either the Birth 2012 website, or you can always come to the Cutting Edge Consciousness website, because, of course, this will be up as well. Barbara, thank you so much for spending the time today with us. We love having you.
Well, I love being on, and thank you very much for asking me. And I look forward to our next dinner at Louis, Barnet.
It will be soon. It will be soon. Big love to you and to our dear friend Judy as well.
Yes. All right.
And to our listeners, stay tuned, because we'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness with Barnet Bain and Freeman Michaels. We just finished quite a conversation with Barbara Marx Hubbard, who always leaves me churning more than a couple of thoughts.
That's it. I love it. I love everything Barbara has to say. I love what she represents, and it was a joy to have her on the show. So I
want to just say one thing.
Oh,
about
yeah,
Barbara.
please, of course.
As I alluded to earlier, the political conventions are going on. You may not have known that back in early
84.
60s, is it 84?
84, she was nominated. She was the first woman. She was
right.
nominated the same year as Geraldine Ferraro.
Well, she was nominaed for the vice
first.
presidency of on the Democratic ticket, and Geraldine Ferrara sewed up the nomination.
Yeah.
Had she not, who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows where we would be broadcasting from today.
That's right. What I wanted to mention was something that she said that I love for me.
Yeah.
This idea of a new norm. You and I were talking about...
As opposed to a dull norm.
Well, so look, the offer of a new norm versus changing or trying to hang on to something. So there's a lot of things in my life and in your life, Barnet, over the last, whatever the time frame is, doesn't matter, where things have shifted and adjusted. And we understand things that yesterday, seemed more complicated than they do today. And there's these sort of, moments of shift, frankly. I like the language, the new norm. There's a new norm. So,
and what is the new norm?
For me personally? Or yeah. So it's interesting because
the new norm is personal.
Yeah.
I think that's
a
hallmark.
That's a
of
great
the new
point.
norm is
yes.
There is no objective experience.
That's it.
It's personal.
That's
one. What's another one?
Well, there's qualities in it. There's a contemplative quality where I'm personally more thoughtful than I was in the past. I'm more reflective, self-reflective in a generous way. This idea of capacity. There's more space for possibility. I'm very conscious of how I relate to uncertainty, and again, that's an area where I realize there's been a shift, an opening. There's a new
norm. Less
norm.
rigid, more willingness to explore, less fear around letting go of old ideas of who I am, what I am. The next piece, the next hallmark of the new norm, for me, would have to be the higher nature, the higher truth, vis-a-vis where I've been operating from for close to 60 years. The higher truth is that is one of absolute dynamic flow and change.
Yep.
And that nothing is certain from the outside in. There is, Barbara introduced along with death and taxes, the only third thing that you can count on is uncertainty.
Well, and we go from tolerating uncertainty
To making a friend of it.
to or even celebrating mystery, to say that again, the possibility that the vision is not tied tightly, it's around possibilities that we only can tell you the scent, we can tell you the qualities, but we're not crunching everything down, because part of what the crisis, if you will, offers is that you're not going to solve it at the level of consciousness that created it. I'm repeating what I've heard a gazillion times. And in
Einstein.
that,
Albert Einstein said that.
And in that, what the new norm suggests is that the answers only lie in possibility. That it's really about the openness and then the resonance is a heartfelt resonance. That's the ability to hold a vision.
Heartfelt. Body felt.
Yeah.
Less ruminative. Less strategic. A different relationship with being embodied. Feelings. Not to say that it is healthier to make decisions out of our emotions, but it is healthier to respect our emotions and to be aware of our emotions, to allow them to cycle through us. The old norm was to collapse all emotional experiences into some kind of mental organization.
Yeah, or into stories that are
mental organizations. Yeah, are stories. Are better understood as stories, and as bad stories. Sometimes good stories, but a lot of bad stories, a lot of fears, and a lot of different way of interacting with the world. Feelings, emotion states, feeling states, having a body awareness of what's going on with us, allowing that to move through. As you say, more expansive, firing on more cylinders. It's the equivalent of moving from a 4-cylinder vehicle to a 12-cylinder vehicle.
Yeah, and we've talked about it in terms of a felt sense. This idea of feelings, where feelings get hijacked by stories, by patterns, by ways of organizing our feelings into conclusions that are less and less constructive as we move more and more, at least as I move more and more into consciousness. The stories arrive in my awareness as threads of possibility. To the degree I have an observer, to the degree I'm in a kind of consciousness that can allow for more complexity, that's expanded enough so that more than one story can come up at the same time. So a feeling can generate a whole litany of stories. And I've actually been practicing this very diligently, this, to allow a first story to arrive, and another story, and another story. And there's a sort of marveling at all these threads of possibility which I can follow. But in following none of them, it honors the feeling, and it allows the next feeling to arrive.
Well, sometimes we follow none of them, and it's powerful.
Yeah.
And sometimes we choose an option to follow.
We navigate them.
The irony here,
yes,
is that
we love paradox.
The more options we have, the more possibilities, the more cards you can hold.
Yep.
The more power you have.
Yep.
And I don't just mean at the level of the game playing. I'm talking now mysteriously.
Oh, big time.
Energetically.
Big
the
time.
more options, when I only have one option, it's going to be this way or that way.
That's it.
There's not a lot of freedom there. But if I have, well, it could be this way, it could be that way, it could be this other way, this other way, this other way, this other way. The more that I have, ironically, the more ability I have to choose, because I am not having my choice draining down one particular sinkhole, simply because all of my beliefs and all of my structured imagination and memory only point to that one conclusion.
Yeah. Though this is, we've said this many times, this is developmental, because there was a time when complexity for me at developmental stages was paralyzing. I would get completely overwhelmed with complexity. And I loved to, at that state of consciousness, crunch everything down to something where I could name it.
Absolutely.
And then I'd run out and I'd run out into my world, as it were, trying to get people to collude with me on my story so that I felt safe and comfortable and so forth and so on. My current propensity is not to get people to collude with my story, to watch the stories that come up and hold them much lighter and much freer, which is a beautiful, freeing, liberating experience. And that is becoming, to harken back, a new norm. Because you were asking at the very beginning, well, what's the new norm for you? Well, this is a description of a new norm, a way where there's a contemplative element of like, wow, and an observation element like, wow, I'm really aware of the parts of me that are coming up in me, that are being expressed in my world as I'm seeing it. In other words, that what's showing up in my experience, I'm more willing to own it because I'm like, oh, this is interesting, at least in the way I experience it, not what it means in some sort of objective way. That is the new norm, to where we really own, at this felt sense level and this awareness level, our own path.
There are things that, as you speak, in my own sense of what you're talking, there is an experience of that that gives rise to a sense of confidence, enthusiasm, an optimism, a hopefulness, an excitement, a curiosity. So here's this whole wonderful stew of emotions and feelings and frequencies, all of which contribute to what I've been calling for the last 6 hours since we met earlier. I don't know. I've never used this word before, but they create a mood. They create a sort of baseline. It is the quality of the spice in the soup. That spice is causal.
Yeah.
I believe that. I have experienced that with every part of myself. I understand that what is more causal and has more impact than my ability to put a light switch on and off or to empty a glass, what has more systemic impact over the whole of my life is the way I have it spiced.
And that's a felt sense.
And that's it is a conscious, it is an aware sense of the qualities of emotion that I am bringing moment to moment. And out of that confidence, there is a different quality of lucid dreaming, to use that language.
Yeah.
I think that when we were little people, I remember lying on my back in the yard, and I knew then that row, row, row your boat, life is but a dream, was that was the highest truth I could get to at that point. It wasn't just a song. I thought, well, this is how it works. And I'm returning to that.
Well, what's interesting to me is I have a lot of sense memories, we've talked about this, where I'm present to a sensation. I'm present to something that's coming up and through me. And it's very much my experience from start to now. I'm not measuring time. I'm just saying it's throughout my experience. And I even have it in terms of future memory, these ideas of synchronicities that are primarily sensation driven. So there's a smell that's familiar, and there's a sense of it, like a scent. We talked about that as a scent you would follow.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a scent that you can track back. There's a whole through line of it to very early memories, at least on the sensation level. And they're almost always calming and soothing for me. Sense memories are. So that's one piece that
You're
can say.
calibrated to the ones that are calming and soothing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this
You're
cliche.
right.
There's a
You're
cliche
right.
now.
This is a good point. Go.
There is a cliche of I forgot where I was going with this. Oh, calming and soothing. There is a cliche that has to do with being in the moment, and that there's a fine line between being a mystic and being a madman.
Yeah, definitely.
And that has something to do, whatever else it has to do with, it has something to do at least with what you've just said. You're able to tune in selectively to energy states that are not locked in time. That time is an expression of a bigger energy state, an emotional state, and so these are timeless states that we pull in an experience of it, and we string it like a pearl on a necklace. That happened here. That happened here. But likewise, someone that has maybe an unpleasant experience with altered states or drug experiences is tapping
or
in
traumas.
Or traumas.
Yeah.
You're tapping into a whole basket of pearls that have not yet been strung.
Yeah, and the world reflects back how dangerous and scary it is, because that's the felt sense that's being mirrored in the world around us. Okay, and with that, I
think we've come to the end
really
of our
have.
time here.
It's been fun, though.
It has been fun.
Always fun. And we're glad that you spent the time today to be with us, and we really hope that you keep coming back.
We
to
hope
Cutting Edge
that you'll
Consciousness.
check out our Facebook page. We like to be liked. You can find us on Facebook, and I like to say that every week.
Panders for likes.
Pandering for likes. So shilling for likes. So we will see you next week here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Thanks for listening.